House will come to order. I know rules went a little bit long, so we're going to give them a few more minutes, but we're going to read a group of privileged resolutions. So the House will come to order. Members, please come to your seats. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to a group of privileged resolutions?
Honoring the life and memory of David Lamar Beecher, Sr. Commending all veterans and their families in this state, commending TechBridge Incorporated on the occasion of its 25th anniversary and recognizing March 17, 2025 as TechBridge Day at the state capitol. Congratulating and commending Irene Barton for receiving the 2025 Yellow Rose Nikki T. Randall Service Leader Award. Commending Kristen Timoteo, the Georgia Public Library Services 2024 Library Employee of the Year, recognizing and commending Dr. Jose A. Marquez Leon. Celebrating the Georgia Latino Film Alliance and the Georgia International Film Festival. Expressing support for increased awareness of stomach cancer. Commending Sam Yee for his trailblazing and extraordinary contributions to Georgia's jazz community. Commending Colt Manufacturing Company for its commitment to safe and responsible firearms ownership. Recognizing and commending Mayor Allison Wilkerson. Congratulating and commending Cordisha McGill Brown for receiving the 2025 Yellow Rose Nikki T. Randall Service Leadership Award. Recognizing March 27th, 2025 as City of Thomasville Day at the state capitol. Congratulating the St. Joseph's Hospital of Savannah, Georgia upon its 150th anniversary. Recognizing and commending Delane Roberts on the occasion of her retirement. Recognizing and commending the Metro Atlanta Coalition for Healthy Neighborhoods, Wholesome Wave, Georgia. And recognizing March 20th, 2025 is Out the Trap Day at the state capitol, and for other purposes. That completes the reading of the privileged resolutions.
Is there any objection to adopting the privileged resolution? Hearing none, the resolutions are adopted. Mr. Clerk, will you read the caption to Senate Bill 144?
Senate Bill 144 by Senator Watson, the 11th, and others to be entitled an act to amend Article 6 of Chapter 7 of Title 2 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to liability for use of fertilizers, plant growth regulators, or pesticides, so as to clarify that a manufacturer cannot be held liable for failing to warn consumers. This bill has been referred to the Committee on Agriculture and Consumer Affairs. That committee recommends that this bill do pass.
Representative Stephen Meeks from down in the Jessup area is recognized to present the bill, Senate Bill 144.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, a pleasure to come to you today to bring Senate Bill 144, LC 144 CSFA from Senator Watson, as the Speaker mentioned. Ladies and gentlemen, if you will look on line 2 through 4 of the bill, so as to clarify that a manufacturer cannot be held liable for failing to warn consumers of health risks above those required by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. Now, you've gotten thousands of emails just like I have, and you've been told what this bill does and does not do. But ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly what the bill does. As we say in the South Georgia vernacular, it just says the law is the law and the EPA is the law when it comes to the label. You know, ladies and gentlemen, y'all know that agriculture is our number one industry in the state of Georgia. We produce the cheapest, safest, most affordable food supply of anywhere in the world. We only have that ability to do that because of science, technology, and a comprehensive, redundant regulatory system that reviews and approves plant protection products. You know, in 1960, one farmer only fed 25 people. If I surveyed the producers in this room, they would also agree with me that today, one farmer feeds an average of 169. It's not because of the weather. It's because of science and technology that we are able to do that. The science behind the chemical compounds used in agriculture and urban ag are subjected in the United States to the most rigorous regulatory structure of anywhere in the world. Some of you may or may not know that chemical compounds that are used in Europe that are used here in the United States have recently been labeled in Europe. So again, what does Senate Bill 144 do? Again, I direct your attention to lines 2 through 4 of the bill that basically says the law is the law and the EPA is the law of the land when it comes to the label. But why is this important? It will help keep chemistries available for Georgia farmers and farms in rural America and urban settings that are manufactured here in the United States. It's not a surprise to anyone that more and more of our chemical chemistries are coming from overseas. We need to make sure that we can continue to have those manufactured domestically here in the United States under our rules, our regulations, and under our safety protocol. So how did we get here? Thanks to California, Proposition 65 is really kind of where it all started, mandating that a manufacturer of a certain chemistry put on the warning label may cause cancer. They were basing that off of one study out of France, they call it the Iraq study. It was based off a subset of data that, in my estimation and talking to those who were engaged with EPA on a daily basis, the study was conducted with a very small subset of data points that they chose to use. It wasn't what the EPA uses here in America. The EPA took a look at it. They used a broader set of data points and came to a different conclusion. Even the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals came out and said, you know what, the state of California cannot require that because the EPA says that it is misleading. And in that case, it is indeed misleading because there is no science to back up what California wanted to do. Now I want y'all to think about this. During the 3 months of the year that we're here in this chamber, legislating and doing the people's work of Georgia, it's usually the 3 months out of the year that we import our food, right? Because of our climate conditions, we don't grow year-round. Where do y'all think that comes from? Where do you think that the products that are used come from? Products coming from Mexico, a country that has significantly more lax regulatory environment, and they use more harsh chemicals than what we use. Grapes coming out of Chile. Is it the same regulatory environment? Absolutely not. We rely on those imports, but we don't control what they put on those. We're going to see that in a few months, actually in another week or two, if I had to guess, when products start coming from Mexico and South America where the climate is warmer. We don't control what they put on theirs. We do here. The bigger picture is, are we going to continue to feed ourselves using the chemistry and science that is available to us or not? We're going to allow it to be manufactured here, or are we going to bring it in from overseas? I just assume have it here where our regulatory environment controls the outcome of what we put on our food products. And ladies and gentlemen, it's the same food products that I eat, that my family eats, that my child eats. Many of y'all have seen John William running around here from time to time. It's the same food products that you eat. Georgia's farmers take great pride in the training that comes with applying any chemistry that we apply. The University of Georgia Cooperative Extension Service has developed one of the best training programs, and every time I go to a training program somewhere, I submit this card to them with an ID number on the back that tells them how many training credits I've had and what I've been trained on to make sure that we are indeed using anything that we use in the wisest manner possible for the benefit of food production and the health of our neighbors. Mr. Speaker, there was some question in Rules Committee in terms of the lag in time and when EPA does react to data that is submitted to them, and I appreciate the conversation that I've had with the gentlelady. I went back and made a call while I had a few minutes to ask the question of, okay, how quickly can EPA issue a stop to a product that is on the market that additional harm that may be caused is being caused? And under FIFRA, the I get this tied up from time to time. The Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, known as FIFRA, there are emergency orders. Whenever data is submitted to the EPA, they can in turn, and then talking to even our state regulators, what happens? Data is verified. And in this particular case, on August the 6th, 2024, Dacthal, there was an emergency order issued, and the product was immediately moved from the market. But Mr. Speaker, this is not about a single product. It's about all products that we use in agriculture and allowing us to continue to produce the most abundant, safest food supply of anywhere in the world. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope that you will join me in supporting this legislation so we can continue to do that. We are America. We are heavily regulated when it comes to what we can and cannot spray on the food products that we are producing for human consumption. I ask for your favorable consideration to House Bill 144, and Mr. Speaker, I'll yield for a couple of questions, if there are any.
The gentleman does have a couple. Representative Carter, to your left, way back to extreme left, Chairman Meeks.
Oh, there you are. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm asking the same question that I asked yesterday in committee. Because as I read the language and I'm trying to understand, not being an attorney, the language speaks of not being able to sue because there isn't notice on the label. However, there have been suits and these manufacturers have lost because people have been harmed. So help me understand, if this measure passes, what will be the cause for someone who's been harmed to bring suit if they can't show that the issue in the product is what has caused the harm?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the question, and we did have a great conversation yesterday in the Agriculture Committee. What this bill is saying, based on the label and from the data and the science from the Environmental Protection Agency, which does not have data to support any warning that may be on the label. That's all we're saying here. If there is a different cause of action that an individual would like to take against any product, we don't take away that ability in this. This is solely based on the label that's approved by EPA and the wording that is on that.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you share an example of someone who has been harmed that can bring suit? How would they go through that process if they're not able to show that there is something negligent in the product, that the manufacturers at some degree know that there's something in the product, right? But they're not on the label. I understand the EPA side of that, and maybe other people may need some explanation. Because I think at the end of the day, what we want to do is protect our constituents and not necessarily the manufacturers. So can you help me really and help us understand that? Because we're still having a little pause.
Well, as you know, I'm not an attorney either. But the way that I view it and the way that I read it, if there are some other issues that you may experience from being around the application of this product, then this legislation doesn't prohibit you from taking calls for that. Again, I mean, and it could be any warning. I mean, I was sharing with others earlier, there are products that we apply on a daily basis that has poison written all over. You take additional precautions when we are utilizing those for ourselves and for those who are applying it. As long as we're following those rules and regulations, that's what EPA has looked at and said this product is deemed safe to apply. So in my estimation, if there are other things that, other symptoms that are caused, you would be able to take a cause of action based on that. This is specific to any warning that may not be on the label. But again, EPA won't even allow you to put one on the label unless there's data to support that. Yes, ma'am.
Representative Jaspers to your right is recognized for a question. The gentleman will yield.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We're good now. I had a long career as a county extension agent. Spent 30 years training people how to read a label. And it's not true when you look at your bill, it does nothing to ease the regulations or even ease or lower, especially lower the standards that a user of a pesticide has to follow.
The gentleman knows of what he speaks given his distinguished career in extension service.
And I think it's important to note, sir, if the gentleman still yield.
Yes, sir.
That it's true that the pesticide label that can be 1 page or 30 pages long gives the producer, the user, all the information they need to use that product safely and to protect our food supply.
The gentleman knows of what he speaks.
Well, thank you for bringing the bill.
Thank you, sir.
Gentleman, yield to a question from Representative Bernal on your left, out in front of you to your left.
The other left.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate you telling us all about the EPA and how much our country protects us and that the other countries, we don't know what comes from them. However, our current federal government has just fired 400 people. So what happens when EPA goes away? Who's going to protect us?
Well, I do believe that that's a conversation we're going to have to make sure we're on top of.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker,
You
with
have
that,
one more question from Representative Corbett, if the gentleman will yield to your
sir.
right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the gentleman yield?
yes, sir.
Is it not true that providing a clear and consistent regulatory framework, this bill fosters a stable business environment that attracts investment into Georgia's agriculture sector?
The gentleman knows of what he speaks.
Thank you for the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And ladies and gentlemen, as we continue to feed Georgians and the world, I hope that you will stand with agriculture on this important measure and ask for your favorable consideration to House Bill 144. With that, Mr. Speaker, I'll yield the will.
The gentleman has yielded the well. You had other questions, maybe they'll be answered because we have a number of folks signed up to speak to Senate Bill 144. I'm going to allow up to 25 minutes for those opposed and those in favor. Up to 25 minutes. I assure you, you don't have to take up to 25 minutes. We'll begin with those who are opposed. Representative Drenner is recognized to speak to Senate Bill 144. Representative Carla Drenner. Ladies recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was headed to get my coat because it is so cold in here. So if you...
You want to borrow mine? I'll bring it down there.
No, do you mind? My hands are shaking. So I rise today to voice my strong opposition to Senate Bill 144, which seeks to amend Article 6 of Chapter 7 of Title 2 of the Official Code of Georgia Annotated regarding the liability for the use of fertilizers, plant growth regulators. Oh, thank you.
You look better in it than I do. My goodness.
Thank you. Thank you. Chivalry is not dead. I appreciate this. It makes a great picture, too. While the intent of this legislation may be to support agricultural growth and ensure the availability of crop protection products, The implications of this bill raise serious concerns, particularly when it comes to the health and safety of Georgian citizens and the environment. I have 5 key objections. Number 1, potential health risk to consumers. Senate Bill 144 would limit the liability of pesticide manufacturers by stating that they cannot be held responsible for failing to warn consumers of health risk that go beyond the warnings required by the US EPA. While the EPA does regulate pesticides, it is essential to recognize that their assessments may not always reflect new or emerging scientific data about health risk. By restricting the duty to warn only to EPA-approved labels, this bill effectively undermines the responsibility of manufacturers to alert consumers to potential risk that may not have been fully assessed by the EPA or that may become clearer over time. This could place Georgia citizens, especially farm workers and rural communities, at greater risk. Objection number 2, ignoring local public health concerns. While the agricultural industry is vital to Georgia's economy, this bill fails to account for the specific public health concerns that may arise in local communities. Local health departments, healthcare providers, and researchers often identify risk that national agencies like the EPA may overlook. This bill would restrict the ability of state-level health authorities to act in the best interest of Georgia's people by weakening the liability for pesticide manufacturers. Objection number 3, diminishing consumer protection. Senate Bill 144 sets a dangerous precedent where corporations are not held fully accountable for their products. Consumer protection laws exist to ensure that people are adequately informed about the risk associated with products they use. By removing the possibility for additional warning labels or safety information, this legislation weakens protections that could potentially save lives and prevent long-term health effects. Objection number 4, risk of environmental damage. We cannot overlook the environmental consequences of pesticide use. While agriculture is indeed crucial to Georgia's economy, our land, water, and biodiversity must also be safeguarded. Limiting accountability for pesticide manufacturers could result in more hazardous chemicals being released into our environment with long-term, irreversible consequences for Georgia's natural resources. My last objection is public distrust of regulatory oversight. This bill suggests a heavy reliance on the federal EPA, which, though an important body, does not always align with the public health priorities of Georgia's citizens. Relying exclusively on federal regulations and stripping away state-level responsibilities creates a public perception of insufficient oversight, further eroding trust in government and regulatory systems. In conclusion, while we all recognize the importance of supporting Georgia's agricultural economy, it is equally important to ensure that our citizens and the environment are protected. Senate Bill 144 undermines the safety of our communities by shielding pesticide manufacturers from accountability for potential health risk that may go unaddressed by the federal EPA. This is not an issue of economic growth versus public health. It is about striking a balance that protects the health and well-being of every Georgian. I urge you to vote no. It is our responsibility to create a system that holds corporations accountable for their actions and ensures the safety of all who live and work in our state. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the will, and I'm going to bring you your coat back.
Thank you. The lady has yielded the will. Representative Rahman is recognized to speak to the bill. Representative Rahman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, today I rise in strong and vehement opposition to Senate Bill 144. And I really hope you will take a moment to allow me to lay out for you how this is part of something way bigger that is going to make our constituents and our families less safe. And that is not an exaggeration. The corporations behind these bills have been working around the country to limit their liability. They are trying to shield themselves from the consequences of their products and the way they are harming consumers. In fact, they have now been before the Supreme Court twice and failed both times, including as recently as February of last year. So what did they do? They decided to go to legislatures, much like ours, and they went to several of them. And do you know where they most recently failed? In Idaho. Not some progressive bastion, but a place that is actually more to the right than Georgia. And it's because people are refusing to allow these corporations to be shielded by our votes. In fact, Idaho overwhelmingly killed their efforts. Because the reality is, a lot of people around the country, and particularly lawmakers, are recognizing this for what it is, an attempt to shield themselves from responsibility. I refuse to be used by a corporation as a shield for the consequences of their actions. In fact, just yesterday, in the past 24 hours, because the point of this bill is it says, you know what, the standard that we are going to go by is the federal one. And what this body is trying to do is trying to use federal government inefficiencies to say, we've done our due diligence. But no, we haven't. The EPA within the past 24 hours not only has announced almost 1,300 layoffs, but in addition has announced multiple deregulations related to our air, to our water, to the things that we need every single day. And then to have the audacity for some of these companies to say, poor us, we need your help. We are in such dire straits. When in fact, they've now tried the judicial branch, now they're coming to the legislative branch, and also are already gutting the executive branch part of this, both on a federal and state level. And we're being told, no, we are actually just trying to improve standards. We're actually trying to make sure standards are equal across the board. No, they are literally gaming the board. No matter which way you are moving these pieces, they are changing the actual board they are working on. We cannot be pawns in this game. We cannot allow ourselves to make the world more dangerous for consumers and for Georgians. And I want to be clear, at the heart of this bill, at its most basic fundamental level, what this bill is saying is it is saying that a corporation can bring a product to market, and it is on the consumers and the rest of us to prove that market is dangerous. I firmly believe that you need to prove your product is safe before you bring it to the market. It shouldn't be, let's try it out and then see what happens. This is not, to be clear, this door has already been opened. We cannot further open it. We cannot further hurt more people. Because the reality is, yes, we do get updated science. Yes, we do get updated regulations. But let's be honest, and I'm going to be so honest with you, I don't know what's going to be left of the EPA to actually deal with these corporations. And if the only entity that we are going to be listening to on these labels, in court, everywhere else, is going to be the EPA, is anybody going to be able to successfully get the justice that they deserve for the harm that's been caused to them? And lastly, I truly believe in procedure. To hold this bill, knowing that some of our members had flights, that some of our members had work commitments, and bring it at the last moment. To me, that is not okay. It tells me there's something wrong with this bill and that we needed to shove it through as quickly as possible. I firmly believe that Georgians deserve better than this, and I sincerely hope you join me in opposition to this bill, even if it means you got to leave early. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the will.
I'll just remind the lady that this is not an attempt to ram anything through. This body meets on the days we're scheduled to meet, and we're here till we need to be here to finish our legislation, whether we're done at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, or 10 o'clock. Representative Willis is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. I rise today in opposition to SB 144 for a variety of reasons. This bill came through committee, the committee that I sit on. The committee is called Agriculture and Consumer Affairs. So I speak to you today from a position of the protection of the consumer. First, to define an acronym that you'll hear a bit more of today, FIFRA, F-I-F-R-A, Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. Assuming you didn't know that, that is what FIFRA stands for. The EPA does not have any authority to determine what a manufacturer knowingly withheld, concealed, misrepresented, or whether or not they destroyed material information. The EPA can only enforce FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, meaning at most they could bring an enforcement action against a company for misbranding a pesticide. Both of my parents led distinguished careers in federal government. My mother retired from the EPA as an investigator. Here's what I know for sure. When something comes to the EPA to make a change in labeling, there's a process and a procedure. That process and procedure takes time. That process and procedure could take 6 months. That process and procedure could take a year. So my immediate question in committee was what happens to the consumer in that gap while we wait for a label to be changed or something to be stated as unhealthy for a consumer? There was no answer, therefore, my concern remains. Only a judge or jury could determine if a violation occurred. If the EPA went through all of the steps and took a company to court to hold them accountable for knowingly concealing material information regarding human health risks, a jury would then be tasked with determining whether or not they made their case. It is up to a jury to determine that a manufacturer violates FIFRA. Again, it is up to a jury to determine whether or not a manufacturer has violated FIFRA. If the EPA tried to determine this without due process, they would rightfully be sued by the manufacturer and then lose. I hope that I'm exemplifying the dangerous loop that this places us in. Regardless of what's happening at a national level, this is still America, where every person deserves due process, especially those accused of a crime. This puts inappropriate pressure on the EPA, which we already don't know where they stand right now, today or tomorrow, with all that's going on. This puts undue pressure on the EPA to vindicate individual rights rather than protect public health. The EPA's mandate is to protect public health rather than purse claims to the end in order to make a determination that would revive civil lawsuits. This exception only applies to human health claims and does not protect property rights claims. And quickly, I want you to know that Monsanto knowingly concealed the risks that dicamba sprayed over the top would drift and harm neighboring farms. What I'm speaking of is even if I choose to use a pesticide and my neighbor does not, there's something called drift. For once it gets in the air, it can then travel, and it can travel to your organic farm, and it can hang out over your organic crops, and then it can infect or weaken what is happening to what you're growing, that you're selling as organic. We can't overlook that. So the ultimate question is, why would we ever stand here today to weaken consumer protections when the committee is called Agriculture, which we love and support, and Consumer Affairs, which we stand here today to weaken protections for? In conclusion, for those of us who have survived inexplicable cancers, for those of us who have received diagnoses and had to fight for our lives and won without explanation as to where our sicknesses have come from, when we don't have the cancer gene, when we still receive a diagnosis that's life-threatening, like I did, and there's no way for the doctor to tell you where it came from, your mind begins to spin. Is it environmental? Is it dietary? Is it pesticides? Is it the food that I'm eating? In the absence of a clear answer, we must protect consumer affairs. And not just for those of us who have fought for our lives and won with inexplicable illnesses, but for those that we have lost. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Thank you, Representative. The lady has yielded the well. That concludes those speaking that are opposed to the bill. We now have up to 25 minutes for those in favor. Representative Osteen is recognized to speak to the bill. The lady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. Today I rise in support of Senate Bill 144. Like most of you, I've learned over the course of this session that Senate Bill 144 is certainly an emotional topic to several Georgians. In fact, my inbox, probably like yours, has been inundated with countless copy and paste emails, but I haven't opened the first personal email with a real-life story to tell. However, I'll share my personal story with you in a moment, but let's look first at why this bill is vital to the success of agriculture, our state's #1 industry. The Environmental Protection Agency, aka the EPA, serves as the federal agency charged with protecting the environment and human health in the United States. In other words, they are the sole authority for determining what is and what is not deemed factual and necessary information that is to be printed on product labels. Senate Bill 144 will clarify who makes the clarify who makes the rules to play by regarding pesticide labels. Again, that is the EPA, period. This bill does not absolve companies of any wrongdoing. Rather, this is a bill to keep all pesticides available in our toolbox. And this issue is not about one pesticide nor one company. The future of ag profitability depends on a full complement of safe, effective chemicals to address problems in production agriculture by using the best practices and modes of action. As I mentioned earlier, I do have a story to tell. We're a multi-generational family of production row crop farmers that take immense pride in helping produce the safest, most abundant, and most affordable food supply on planet Earth. Our peanuts are grown sustainably and responsibly on our farm in which we live in South Georgia. In fact, we eat them ourselves. Our cotton becomes the shirts and the jeans most of us enjoy wearing, and our pine trees eventually become the wood for building materials. We take very seriously our role in meeting the basic needs of life by producing safe food, clothing, and shelter. We would never consider compromising our integrity by cutting corners or safety measures in order to meet the needs of us all. My husband and son are responsible for everything applied to our crops. As required by the Georgia Department of Agriculture to keep their pesticide credentials, they are continually trained, licensed, and informed ag professionals who are on the front line of agriculture, making certain everything is stored, mixed, and applied according to these labels. As a matter of fact, one of the USDA inspectors just showed up at our farm, completely unannounced last month, to inspect our chemical storage, safety equipment, and application records. My husband and I would never, ever, ever allow our son to be put in harm's way, especially since he is the loving father to our only grandchild. Additionally, I would never stand in this well and ask my fellow legislators and friends to essentially tie my family's hands and all the hands of the farmers, pesticide applicators, and workers in the chemical business in the great state of Georgia from being able to seek damages from bad actors. I would never do that. My knowledge doesn't come from magazine articles or posts on social media regarding this topic. My family is ground zero for handling and applying pesticides. We apply these products daily throughout the growing season. This critical piece of legislation will ensure that Georgia farmers keep available the essential chemistries needed to produce a safe, affordable, sustainable, and responsible crop that solidifies continued food security for our state, country, and world. As President Dwight Eisenhower so thoughtfully penned many decades ago, farming looks mighty easy when your plow is a pencil and you're 1,000 miles from a cornfield. Friends, I ask for your favorable consideration of Senate Bill 144. Our farmers are depending on your affirmative vote to protect the future of Georgia agriculture. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Thank you. The lady has yielded the well. That completes our conversation on Senate Bill 144. Those that are opposed and those that are in favor. Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered? Hearing none, the previous question is ordered. We do have a minority report, and then we do have chairman's time. 20 minutes will be allotted for each. The minority report will be brought to us by Representative Stacey Evans. Representative Evans is recognized to speak to Senate Bill 144. The lady has the well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues. I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 144. I want to touch on what this bill is about to begin with. We've been told here today that this is not about a single product, but it is. You can just Google it. This bill that we're considering here today is not unlike a bill that sits on legislative desks in states all across this country. It is a nationwide effort. It's passed in a lot of places. It's been stopped in a couple of places, Midwestern states to be exact. Stopped by who in those states? Farmers. Farmers stopped this bill in Midwestern states. This bill's not about farmers. This bill is about Bayer, B-A-Y-E-R, the company. Bayer bought Monsanto. Monsanto made Roundup. Roundup causes cancer. That is not a debate anymore. Roundup causes cancer. A lot of people got hurt. A lot of people got sick. Monsanto got sued. Monsanto got liability. Monsanto sold to Bayer. Bayer bought that liability, and now Bayer wants to ask us to take it away. They made the deal. We don't need to help them. They have plenty of lawyers to help them, I'm sure. It's not about farmers. Here's the reality of life, ladies and gentlemen. Industry is always ahead of government. It's not meant to be an insult to us. It's just reality. They've got more money. They've got more people. They got more researchers. They can go faster. While we appreciate the EPA, and I'm really loving all the love for the EPA regulators today in this body, but industry is always ahead. So under this bill, if industry finds a problem through their own research and development, for example, that a product causes cancer, may damage land, may cause asthma, who knows, it could be anything. They have to report to the EPA through the FIFRA process, and that's fine, that's the law now. And I'm aware that perhaps industry wanted to make sure through this legislation that they only have to do one avenue of reporting just to the EPA, not also to the EPD, not also to any other regulators out there, and that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. But the bill does more than that. It says that when industry reports to EPA what they've discovered, that's it. I told them. They didn't tell you. It's not public. I guess if you happen to know somebody who knew that industry just found something and they reported it to FIFRA, you could do a Freedom of Information Act request, and maybe in 6 months you might get the answer and find out what they said. But otherwise, we don't know. So industry tells government. Government looks at it. I heard the author, and I appreciate that, yes, there are times when someone can sound the alarm and there can be an emergency action to take a product off a shelf. But that's not what normally happens. And proponents of this bill have said, and is true, and I don't think anybody's going to find this to be revolutionary. Usually it's slow. EPA gets the information through FIFRA. They look at it. It sits on a shelf. Maybe there's a change of administration. Who knows? Doesn't have to be nefarious. It just takes a minute. 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, a year. So in this interim period of time, under this bill, we've told industry, you told the EPA, if the EPA doesn't tell consumers, you're good. So in the meantime, 6 months, 9 months, a year, 2 years, who knows, consumers keep buying the product. Industry knows there's a problem. Big, little, small, it doesn't matter. We, the consumers, should be able to have informed consent about what we buy. If industry knows there's a problem, why not tell us? Why not let the consumers know so they can decide if they want to buy it? So passing this bill means if industry tells government, that's fine, they can keep selling the product, they can keep knowing that there's a problem, and they will not be on the hook for a failure to warn claim to consumers. That's essentially it. We're giving that up. Right now, consumers would have that right. Under this law, they wouldn't. Now, I have heard my colleagues, who I respect greatly, say, but this doesn't take away let's say the information got shared with the EPA, it didn't get shared with the consumer bought the product, the consumer gets sick, even worse, the consumer dies. My colleagues say, you can still sue for wrongful death. You can still sue for personal injury. You can still sue for all the medical costs for your kid's asthma or whatever happened. Thank you. But how about just tell me in the first place so maybe I don't buy it and my kid doesn't die? Maybe let's do that. But thank you for not killing my claim to recover for my dead child. Consumer information. Yes, it kills a failure to warn claim. So yes, it cuts off that litigation claim, but most importantly, it cuts off incentives for industry to tell the consumers what they know. That's what we're doing, because we're telling them they don't have to. Now here's something funny. It's been Democrats up here speaking against this, but those emails that are coming around to all of our inboxes, most of those are not from Democrats. Those are from Republicans. And how do I know that? I had a general election this last go around, like many of you did, and my opponent, who's a lovely woman that lives in the neighborhood next to mine, who comes down here to lobby on various issues from time to time, she's very much against this bill, and she's been emailing me and you and others. This is a bipartisan thing. This isn't about litigation. This isn't about farmers. This is about Bayer's liability and interference in litigation, and it's about consumer information. That is what it's about. We're cutting that off. Now, I drew up an amendment, and it's on your desk, and we're not going to vote on it because it wasn't approved by the Rules Committee, but I want to talk about it for a second. I've been peddling this amendment. There was a bill just like this that was originally a House bill, and I was trying to get it changed, but then they moved the Senate bill, and then, this came up fast, and so I took my amendment to rules. And all my amendment does is just clarify what I just told you. It makes sure that we keep incentives in place for industry to still tell consumers. That's all it would do. It wouldn't interfere with the regulatory simplification that the proponents of this bill have said they want, which I have no problem with. If you just want to report to one regulator, that's fine. My amendment doesn't touch that. And if that was the purpose of the bill, and not to provide some later protection, not to take away incentives for consumer information, there should have been no problem with my amendment. But I just want to use this as a moment to talk about, why are we so afraid of considering amendments, ladies and gentlemen? This is a modified structure bill, so I can't propose an amendment to you unless the Rules Committee approves it. I didn't ask the Rules Committee to approve the amendment to change the bill before it got to you. I simply asked the Rules Committee to allow me to put it on your desk and let us vote on it. Essentially, ladies and gentlemen, even though we are a co-equal branch of government, even though we are a deliberative body, even though our friends across the hall debate amendments all day, every day, we can't. We effectively cannot. They won't even let me put it on your desk to be considered. So I put it on your desk so you can read it. I put it on your desk because I think it's sad. I think it's sad that we cannot be trusted and empowered to debate and make changes to legislation in this body. And I wish that we could, because I think we could have made this bill better. And that's unfortunate. So because we can't do that, all I can do is ask you to please join me in voting no to Senate Bill 144. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the well.
The lady has yielded the well. That concludes our minority report. Now we'll have the chairman's time. Chairman of the committee from which this came, Agriculture and Consumer Affairs, Chairman Robert Dickey, is recognized to speak to the bill. Mr. Chairman, you have up to 20 minutes, and however you would like to allocate that time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, colleagues. I don't come up here often. I don't come up here often to have to defend bills, but I am mad as I can be right now. So folks are coming after agriculture, coming after your food supply. They've sued everybody else in this state, these attorneys, and big from out of state, around the country, and now they see an opportunity to go after agriculture, go after our food supply. And I'm not going to stand here and let it happen. I'm tired of hearing mistruths from emails and mistruths and wrong statements in this chamber. I'm a farmer, and I know what it takes to farm. And it takes these plant protection products that I depend on to be able to be successful, to be able to grow crops. I'm going home, hopefully sometime this afternoon, to put plant protection products on our peaches. I can't weed 1,000 acres of peaches. I'm going to put plant protection products on my strawberries. I can't sell them with mold and mildew on them. This bill is critical for agriculture and for this nation's food supply. We have the #1 industry in this state is agriculture. And we have to have, I can fight the weather, I can fight bad markets, I can fight disease, but I can't fight the courts with taking away our plant protection products in this state. You know, I don't think we'll starve to death in this country, but if you want every bit of your food imported from Mexico, from South America, go down this road without plant protection products, and that's what will happen. We are the breadbasket of the world. I'm wearing a corn tie right here. You know what? 100 years ago, in the 1950s, corn production was 100 bushels per acre. You know what it is today? 400 bushels per acre. You know what all those chickens you eat? They eat corn. We have to have food in this country. It's a national security. You think egg prices went up? You wait till we can't get food in this country. When our production starts going down,
The world population is going up. You better hold on to your wallet. Nobody can afford the food prices. You know, we're in a world market. All my plant protection, a lot of my plant protection products come from overseas. And if there's disruptions, if I can't put the right fertilizer, the right pesticide, the right fungicide, we'll lose our crop in a week's time. Cotton producers have to have products, or weeds will absolutely consume the fields just in a matter of months or weeks. We have to have consistency in agriculture. We can't be relying on foreign products and foreign food in this country. And this legislation is a small avenue to guarantee that companies feel the confidence to sell these products in our country and our state. We have the most affordable, abundant, safest food supply of any country. Do you know what our life expectancy has done in the last 100 years? As our food production increased, our life expectancy has increased. I just so frustrated here listening to some things I've heard and get away from what we need to do in this state. We're talking about economic development. We're talking about being the #1 state to do business. We've got to have a legal environment in this state that encourages it and encourages agriculture. We've got great strengths in this state in our agricultural industry. It's not just the growing, it's the ag businesses, the producers and the processors and the transportation and all that we do in this state, environmental. We've got to make sure that stays strong in this state. Do not let the courts pull down our great economy in this state, our great ag economy. We had Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins here yesterday. We met with her and asked her for a lot of things. We talked about trade. We talked about research. We talked about farm income and the farm bill. Y'all, this is what we can do in our state. Pass this bill. We can't depend on Washington for everything. This is something we can do right here in this state to strengthen our ag economy and our food economy. You know, I know many of you are ready to go home. I am too. And I said, I'm going home and look at those peach blossoms. But they're very vulnerable. And I've got to have the help of technology, energy supply, labor, good weather, the Lord sending rain and the good dirt and the sunshine. But we've got to have these products. I got to have a supply of them. I can't just wait weeks to get something from somewhere else. I hope the weather will. We're under attack. You see it. The litigation is coming after agriculture, and this is the first blow in my mind that I've seen it, witnessed it firsthand. We got to fight back, folks. You got to stand up for your food supply, for the cost that we don't depend on foreign food. You know, a lot of you are wearing green today, wearing the Lucky Charms and all that. You know why we're celebrating St. Patrick's Day? Because all the Irish moved to this country in the 1850s. 1 million of them starved to death in Ireland, and another 1 million got on boats and came to this country to be able to find food. And I don't want my children and my grandchildren having to worry about food. That's why we need this bill. I hope you'll vote for it and support your food supply and my food supply. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, you going to yield some time? Is that the remainder of the year? Mr. Chairman, you going to yield the remainder of your time?
Yes, sir. I'll yield the remainder of my time.
Chairman Leverett, I think the chairman had designated you to speak to the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Dickey has yielded the well. Representative Leverett is recognized to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to just very briefly address a few issues that have been discussed at great length with regard to this bill. I obviously cannot talk to the need and the need for the availability of these sorts of products. I think the previous speakers have addressed that very passionately and eloquently. They live it every day, and so they know those issues better than I do. What I wanted just simply was to address is what I view to be the legal scope of the bill. So I do not view this as an immunity bill. I do not view this as a bill that really limits many of the kinds of claims you would have as a user of a product's liability claims. The only claim that in my view, this bill adversely would impact is the failure to warn. And that space, to some extent, is already regulated and controlled by the federal government through that FIFRA, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. That already provides that manufacturers have to register these products, they have to disclose information to the EPA about them, and then they have to use on that product a specifically approved label. And as some of the other speakers addressed, that some of this came because other states have been trying to require them to use different or additional labels, which puts the manufacturer in sort of a catch-22. They have to use the federal label, nothing more, nothing less. If they put something else on it, they're in violation of federal law and subject to penalty. So that's part of the issue we're addressing here. And as part of that, we're saying that as long as you're using the federal label, you are not, you can't be found liable under a failure to warn theory. That's the only theory that this bill impacts. And if it's later determined that the company didn't disclose all the information that it had about the product, even that protection goes away. So it doesn't prevent you from suing in negligence, it doesn't prevent you from suing in strict liability and other kinds of claims that you could assert. And so admittedly, this does impact claims you could file, it does. But I believe you've heard from the other speakers how on balance, that is needed, and I think given the limited scope of that impact, there's still other claims that are available. It's not like companies will never have to answer if they have put a dangerous product out into the use by the general public. So I would encourage you to vote for this bill because I believe it is a reasonable response to a problem that is being encountered in the agricultural business to preserve the use of these products, because you've heard people testify who live it every day, how useful they are and how needed they are. And they're still as a source of recovery if people feel like they have been harmed by them. So I would encourage you to vote for this bill. And to the extent I have any additional time left, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield it to Chairman Meeks, who sponsored similar legislation in the House like this one.
The gentleman has yielded the well, and there is time left. On the chairman's time, Representative Meeks is recognized to come back to the well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we've heard a lot of debate today about what this bill does and doesn't do, who it might or might not protect. And ladies and gentlemen, I stand in this well, and when I speak to each of you, I look you eye to eye. I'm not one to look you eye to eye and tell you something that I don't believe. And if for 1 minute that I thought that this bill would weaken you, the one sitting by you, the one in front of you, the one behind me, or our families, I wouldn't be standing here. If it would take away any right of you to take any cause of action, if it would lessen the company's ability to provide you information that you're supposed to get so that you can make an educated decision on whether or not to use a product, I wouldn't be standing here. Comment was made earlier about products coming to the market. Whether you know it or not, it's $300 to $350 million to put a product on the market and 12 to 14 years of research. And I've spoken to our weed scientist at the University of Georgia who makes the recommendations on the mixtures that we spray. And that's not just coming from the companies. That's coming from EPA, that's coming from researchers at research institutions that we value in our state, such as the University of Georgia College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences. I want to reiterate that if a company willingly withholds any information, ladies and gentlemen, it's federal law. You've heard that. It is the case. They won't ever again be able to register a product because they lied to the consumers. They lied to you. They lied to me. Comment was made earlier about dicamba, drift. Yes, that's right. It happened. It got pulled from the market. You know why? Because people in one state, not in Georgia, was not using the product as it was labeled. And because it was not labeled correctly, we have lost that as a tool in our toolbox to effectively manage weeds that others won't. So guess where we are now? With the exception of one product, it's hand. We pull them by hand. Two additional things, and I'll close, Mr. Speaker. The EPA regulates the label, states regulate use of the product. And a few moments ago, when swapping some text with one of the authorities in our state, I want each of you to know that in the state of Georgia, under the Pesticide Control Act, each of these products are registered annually in the state of Georgia. That means our Commissioner of Agriculture, who you know, if he sees a problem with it, he can pull that product. He can pull that label. But ladies and gentlemen, to stand here to say that we're removing the responsibility of a company to be forthright with consumers, I couldn't stand here and look you in the eye if I thought that was the case. I would ask you to support Senate Bill 144 and continue to support our agriculture industry that will continue to support and provide the safest, most affordable, most abundant food supply of anywhere in the world. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'd urge favorable consideration of Senate Bill 144 and ask for your green vote. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Gentlemen, has yielded the well. That completes the chairman's time. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of the bill? Hearing none, the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All in favor of the passage of the bill will vote yes. All those opposed will vote no. And Mr. Clerk, will you unlock the machine? Have all members voted? All members voted? All members voted? If so, Mr. Clerk, will you lock the machine? On the passage of Senate Bill 144, the yeas are 101, the nays are 58. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed.